Hello, welcome back. So we are going to continue reading the novel Lord of the Mysteries by Cuttlefish That Loves Diving. Last time we read chapters 22 to 24. We learned about the starting sequences. We bought a new cane and went back to the university to meet the professor and Mr. Isaac. So we'll continue today with chapter 25, Cathedral. While Isaac muttered to himself, he subconsciously shot a glance at Quentin Cohen, seemingly hoping for hints to jolt his memories. Cohen, with his deep set blue eyes, shook his head without any hesitation. I do not have any impression of it. All right then. Perhaps it just shares a root word. Isaac lowered his left hand and gave a self-deprecating laugh. Klein was rather disappointed with the outcome. He could not help but add on, Mentor, Mr. Isaac, as both of you know, I am very interested in exploring and restoring the history of the fourth epoch. If you ever recall anything or obtain any relevant information, could you please write to me? No problem. As a result of Klein's action today, the silver-haired senior associate professor was rather pleased with him. Isaac also nodded and said, Is your address still the same as before? For now, but I'll be moving soon. I'll write a letter to inform you when the time comes, replied Klein in a respectful manner. Cohen shook his black cane and said, It's indeed about time you move to a place with better environment. At that moment, Klein caught a glance at the newspaper in Isaac's hand. He deliberated on his words before saying, Mentor, Mr. Isaac, what did the newspaper say regarding Welch and Naya? I only learned a little from the police who were in charge of the investigations. Isaac was just about to answer when Cohen suddenly pulled out a pocket watch that was linked to his black tuxedo by a gold chain. Click. He opened the pocket watch and tapped his cane. The meeting is about to open. Isaac, we can't be delayed any further. Give the newspaper to Moretti. All right. Isaac handed over the newspaper he had read to Klein. We'll be going upstairs. Remember to write a letter. Our address has yet to change. It's still the Coy University History Department office. He laughed as he turned around and left the room with Cohen. Took off his hat and bowed. After watching the two gentlemen leave, he paid farewell to the owner of the office, Harvard Stone. He proceeded across the corridor and slowly exited the gray three-story building. With his back against the sun, he lifted up his cane and unfolded the newspaper and saw the title, Tingen Morning Post. Tingen sure has all sorts of newspapers and magazines. There's the Morning Post, Evening Post, the Honest Paper, Backland Daily Tribune, Tassoc Times, family magazines, and book reviews. Klein casually recalled the several names that surfaced in his mind. Of course, the number of them were not local. They were distributed via steam locomotives. Now that the paper making and printing industries were getting more advanced, the cost of newspaper had already decreased to the price of a penny. The audience had reached the audience it reached also grew wider and wider. Klein did not scrutinize the details of the newspaper, quickly flipping to the news section with the report Armed Burglary Murder. According to the police department, the scene at Mr. Welch's home was a horrible sight. There were missing gold jewelry, They were missing gold, jewelry, and money, as well as anything valuable that could be easily taken away. Not even a penny was left behind. There is a reason to believe this was done by a merciless group of criminals that would not hesitate to kill the innocents, such as Mr. Welch and Madame Naya. Once sight of once sight of their faces were caught. This is outright contempt of our kingdom's laws. This is a challenge to public security. No one wishes to have such an encounter. Of course, one piece of good news is that the police have located the murderer and captured the main culprit. We'll do our best to provide news on any follow ups. Reporter John Browning. The matter has been handled and covered up. As Klein walked through the boulevard, he nodded in a hardly noticeable manner. He flipped through the newspaper as he strolled down the path, reading the other news articles and serials in the process. Suddenly, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand as though leaves were stabbing at him. Someone is watching me, observing me, monitoring me. Various thoughts welled up in him as Klein had a faint realization. Back on Earth, he had once felt an invisible gaze before ultimately discovering the source of the gaze. However, it had never felt crystal clear as he was experiencing now. This was the same in the original client's memory fragments. Was it the was it the transmigration or the mysterious luck enhancement ritual which enhanced my sixth sense? Client fought back the urge to seek out the observer. Using his knowledge from reading novels and watching movies, he slowed his pace and put away the newspaper before looking towards the Koi River. Following that, he acted as if he was admiring the scenery, slowly turning his head in different directions. He acted natural as he turned around, taking in everything with his eyes. Other than the trees, grassy plains, and student passing by in distance, there was no other person there. But Klein was certain there was someone watching him. Thus, Klein's heart raced as his blood surged through his body with intense thumping. He unfolded the newspaper and covered half his face, afraid that anyone would discover anything wrong with. He unfolded the papers and covered half his face, afraid that anyone would discover anything wrong with his expression. Meanwhile, he clenched his cane and readied himself to draw his gun. One step, two steps, three steps. Klein proceeded forward slowly. The feeling of being spied upon remained, but there was no sudden outburst of danger. He walked through the boulevard in a somewhat stiff manner and arrived at the waiting point for public carriages when a carriage pulled up coincidentally. Iron Zoot? No, Champagne Street. Klein continually dismissed his thoughts. He originally planned on heading home immediately, but he was afraid of leading the observer of unknown motives to his apartment. Following that, he thought of heading to Zootland Street to seek help from the Nighthawks or his colleagues. However, he thought otherwise, afraid that he would end up alerting his enemy and exposing the Nighthawks. Therefore, he casually chose somewhere else. Sixpence, the ticketing officer replied routinely. Client did not bring any gold pounds with him today. He had hidden the money in his usual spot and only taken two solid notes with him. And before he came, he had spent the same amount of money, leaving him with one solely sixpence. Therefore, he took out all his coins and handed them to the ticketing officer. He found a seat after boarding the carriage, and finally, with the closing of the carriage door, Client felt that unease of being watched vanish. He exhaled slowly as he felt his limbs tingle slightly. What do I do? What should I do next? Client looked out the carriage as he racked his brain for a solution. Until he was clear about the intentions of the person watching him, Client had to assume that there was malicious intent. Many thoughts sprang up in his mind, but he dismissed them. He had never experienced such an event and had to use a few minutes to organize his ideas. He had to notify the Nighthawks. Only they could truly get rid of this threat. But I can't head there directly, or I might expose them. Perhaps that might be their goal? Following this train of thought, Client crudely surmised various possibilities as his thought turned clearer. He exhaled as he regained some semblance of composure. He looked seriously at the scenery outside flying past him. There were no accidents along the way to the Champagne Street, but when Klein opened the door and stepped out of the car, he immediately had the uneasy feeling of being watched again. He acted though he had not sensed anything. He took the newspaper and his cane and slowly made his way in the direction of Zotland Street. But he did not enter that street. He took another in Instead he took another route to the red moonlight street behind. There was a beautiful white plaza there, as well as the large cathedral with a pointy roof, St. Selena Cathedral, the Tingen headquarters of the Church of Ebonite. As a believer, there was nothing odd about him in participating in Mass or praying on his day off. The cathedral exhibited a design similar to Earth's Gothic style. It also had a tall, black, and imposing clock tower situated between the blue and red checkered windows. Klein stepped into the cathedral, followed an aisle into the prayer hall. Along the way, the stained windows were composed of red and blue glass patterns that allowed colored light to shine into the hall. The blue was closer to black, the red the same color as the crimson moon. It made the surroundings seem unusually dark and mysterious. The feeling of being watched vanished. Klein acted unfazed as he walked toward the open prayer hall. There were no high windows here. The deep darkness was emphasized, but behind the arc-shaped holy altar, there, on the wall directly opposite the wall, were about 20 circular fist-sized holes that allowed the radiant sunlight to enter the hall. It was akin to pedestrians seeing the starry sky when suddenly looking up into the night to see the shimmering stars in all their nobility, purity, and holiness. Even though Klein had always believed that gods could be analyzed and understood, he could not help but lower his head here. The bishop was preaching in a gentle tone as Klein silently made his way down the aisle that split the pews into two columns. He searched for an empty area close to the passageway before slowly taking a seat. Leaning his cane onto the back of the pew in front of him, Klein took off his hat and placed it onto his lap, together with the newspaper. He then clasped his hand together and lowered his head. The entire process was done slowly and routinely as though he was really there to pray. Klein closed his eyes as he silently listened to the bishop's voice in the darkness. Lacking clothes and food, they have no covering in the court. They are drenched by rains and puddles around the rocks for lack of shelter. They are often snatched from the breast, hope lost on them. They are poor that have been forced off the proper path. The Evernight did not forsake them, but bestowed them with love. Echoes amplified as they entered his ear. Klein saw a swath of darkness in front of him as he felt his spirit and mind cleansed. He calmly took it in until the bishop finished his preachings and ended Mass, after which the bishop opened a confessional door beside him. Men and women began lining up. Klein opened his eyes and donned his hat once more. With his cane and newspaper, he stood up and found his place in line. It was his turn after more than 20 minutes. He stepped in and closed the door behind him. There was darkness in front of him. My child, what do you wish to say? The bishop's voice sounded from behind the wooden damper screen. Klein took out the 7th Unit Special Operation Department badge from his pocket and handed it over to the bishop through the opening. Someone is stealing me. I wish to find Dunsmith. As though he had been infected by the silent darkness, his tone turned softer as well. The bishop took the badge after a few seconds of silence and said, turn right from the confession booth and walk to the end. There will be a secret door to the side. Someone will lead the way after you enter. As he spoke, he pulled a rope inside the room, causing a particular priest to hear the chime. Klein retrieved his badge and took off his hat and pressed it to his chest. He gave a slight bow before turning around and exiting. After confirming that the feeling of being watched was gone, he wore his half-top hat. Without any excessive emotions, he held his cane and turned right until he arrived by the arched altar. He found the secret door in the wall facing his side. He silently opened it before sneaking in quickly. The secret door closed silently as a middle-aged, black-robed priest appeared under the illumination of the glass lamp. What is it? The priest asked tersely. Klein showed his badge and repeated what he said to the bishop. The middle-aged priest did not ask further questions. He turned around and proceeded to forward in silence. Klein nodded and took off his hat. With his black cane, he slowly followed silently into. Roseanne had once mentioned that heading left from the crossroads towards the Janus Gate would reach St. Helena's Cathedral. The sermon was adapted from Job 24:8, Old Testament. Chapter 26, Practice. The sound of footsteps echoed through the dark, narrow corridor, which was otherwise silent. Klein kept his back straight as he kept up with the priestess' pace. He did not pose question or chat idly with him, remaining silent at the windless body of water. After passing through the heavily guarded passageway, the priest opened a secret door with a key and pointed down a stairwell made of stone. Turn left at the intersection to reach Canyon Gate. May Goddess bless you. Clan gestured the sign of the crimson moon on his chest. Commoner practiced etiquette while the religious partook in ritual blessing. Praise the lady. The priest returned with the same gesture. Clan did not speak further as he walked down the dark stone stairwell with the aid of the refined inlaid gas lamps on both sides of the wall. Midway, he subconsciously turned back and saw the priest standing at the entrance. He was in the shadows and appeared like an immobile wax statue. Klein looked away and continued to proceed down. It did not take long before he hit the ground laid with ice cold stone slabs. This led him to the intersection. He did not turn towards the Chinese gate because Dunsmith, who had recently finished his shift, was definitely not there. He turned right and saw this familiar path. Klein went back up the another flight of stairs and appeared inside Blackthorn Security Company. Seeing doors were tightly shut or half closed, he did not rush into them. Instead, he went to the reception and saw the brown-haired girl focus on a magazine with a sweet smile. Hi, Roseanne. Klein came to her side and deliberately rapped the table. Roseanne stood up suddenly and knocked over a chair and said in a fluster, Hi, nice weather today. Klein, why are you here? She patted her chest and heaved a few sighs of relief. She was like a young lady afraid that her father had caught her scheming. I need to find the captain, Klein answered simply. You gave me a fright. I thought the captain came out. Roseanne glared at Klein. Don't you know how to knock? You should be thankful that I am tolerant and kind woman. Well, I preferred the term lady. Is there a reason why you're looking for the captain? He's in the room opposite Mrs. Oriana. Even though he felt uptight, Klein was so amused by Roseanne, he smiled. He pondered a moment before saying, a secret. Roseanne's eyes widened, and while she reeled in disbelief, Klein did a slight bow and bid her farewell. He went through the reception's partition and knocked on the door of the first office on the right. Come in, Dunsmith's deep and gentle voice sounded. Klein pushed the door and opened it before closing the door behind it. He took off his hat and bowed. Good morning, Captain. Good morning. How can I help you? Dunn's black trench coat and hat were hanging on the clothes stand to his side. He was dressed in a white shirt and black vest. Even though his hairline was rather high, his gray eyes were deep and he appeared much fresher. Someone is following me, Klein answered honestly without any embellishments. Dunn leaned back and clasped his hands together. His deep gray eyes silently looked at Klein's eyes. He did not follow up on the topic of being followed and instead asked, You came from the cathedral? Yes, Klein answered. Dunn nodded gently. He did not comment on its merit or demerits as he switched the subject back. It might be that Welch's father doesn't believe the cause of death that we reported and hired a private investigator from Wend City to investigate the matter. Mid-Sea Mid-Seashire's constant city was also known as Wend City. It was a region with extremely advanced coal and steel industries. It was one of the top 3 cities of Lowen Kingdom. Before waiting for client to give his opinion, Dunn continued, it might also be a result of that notebook. We happen to be investigating where Welch received the Antigonus family's notebook. Of course, we can't eliminate other people or organization that might be seeking out this notebook. What should I do? Klein asked in a serious tone. Without a question, he hoped that it was the first reason. Dunn did not immediately answer him. He raised his coffee mug and took a mouthful, his eyes not showing a silver of ripple. Return the way you came, and then do anything you wish. Anything? Klein returned with a question. Anything. Dunn nodded with certainty. Of course, do not scare them off or violate the law. All right. Klein took a deep breath and bade him farewell. He left the room and went back underground. He turned left at the intersection and bathed in the light from the gas lamps on the two walls. He arrived silently to the empty, dark, and cold passageway. The sounds of the sound of his footsteps echoed, making him sound more alone and terrified. Soon, Klein arrived at the stairwell. He went forward and saw a shadow standing there. The middle-aged priest. The did not The two did not say a word when they met. The priest turned around in silence and made way. He proceeded silently before returning to the prayer hall. The circular halls behind the arched altar were still as pure and bright, while the darkness and silence of the building's interior remained. There were still men and women lining outside the confessional, but much fewer than before. After waiting for a moment, Clan slowly left the prayer hall with his cane and newspaper as though nothing ever happened, successfully leaving the Saint Selena Cathedral. The moment he walked out, he saw the burning sun. He immediately regained the familiar feeling of being observed. He felt like he was a prey being eyed by a hawk. Suddenly, a question surfaced in his mind. Why didn't the observer follow me into the cathedral? Although I could still although I could still have although I could have still used the dark environment and the priest to conceal my temporary disappearance, would it be hard for him to continue monitoring me by pretending to pray? If he had not done something wrong, that there would be no problem walking in with an open and above manner, right? Unless the person had some dark history, making him afraid of the church or fear the bishop, knowing that he might have the powers of a beyonder. In that case, the likelihood of it being private investigator is very slim. Klein exhaled and no longer acted as nervous as he was previously. He took a casual stroll before going around and to the back of Zortland Street. He stopped at an ancient style building with the mottled walls. The address on the door was 3. It was its name was the Zortland Street Shooting Club. Part of the police department's underground shooting range was open to the public as a way to earn some additional funds. Klein went in and the feeling of being watched vanished instantly. He took this opportunity to hand over his Special Operations Department badge to the attendant. After short verification, he was led underground to a small, confined shooting range. 10-meter target, Klein informed the attendant simply. Next, he retrieved the revolver from his underarm holster and the box of brass bullets from his pocket. The feeling of being suddenly targeted made his desire to protect himself win over his procrastination. Therefore, he could not wait to come over to practice his shooting. After the attendant left, he flicked open the cylinder and removed the silver demon hunting bullets. Following that, he filled the cylinder with normal brass bullets. This time, neither he this time neither did he leave an empty spot to prevent misfiring, nor did he take off his formal attire and halved his top hat. He planned on practicing in his usual getup. After all, it was impossible for him to shout, "Wait a minute, I need to change into something more comfortable," after encountering an enemy or danger. Click. Klein closed the cylinder and rolled it with his thumb. Suddenly, he held the gun in both hands, raised it up straight, and aimed at the target more than 10 meters away. However, he was in no hurry to shoot. Instead, he recalled his experience at military training, how to form a line with the iron sights, and knowledge about guns' recoil. While his clothes rustled, Klein repeated his aiming and his holding stance. He was as serious as a student taking a high school exam. After repeating it several times, he retreated to the wall and sat down on a long soft bench. He placed the revolver to the side and began massaging his arms. He rested for quite a while. He spent few minutes recalling his practice before he picked up the revolver with the wooden handle and bronze cylinder. He got into standing he got into standing standard firing position and pulled the trigger. His arm trembled as his body moved back from the recoil. The bullet missed the target. Drawing from experience he gained, he shot again and again until all 6 rounds were finished. Clan stepped back and sat down again as he exhaled. He swung the cylinder out and allowed the 6 shells to fall to the ground. Then, without a change in expression, he inserted the remaining brass rounds. After relaxing his arm, Klein stood up again and returned to his shooting position. Ringing shots echoed as the target shook. Klein practiced and rested repeatedly. He expended all 30 normal rounds and remaining 5 from before. His gra- he gradually hit the target and started aiming for the bull's eye. He swung his sore shoulders and threw out final 5 shots. He lowered his head and inserted the demon hunting bullets with complicated patterns back into the gun, leaving an empty spot to prevent misfiring. After putting the revolver back into his underarm holster, Klein patted the dust from his body and walked out the shooting range to return to the streets. The feeling of being observed rose once again. Klein felt calmer than he previously felt as he slowly walked the Champagne Street. He spent 4 pence on a track carriage to return to Iron Cross Street before returning to his own apartment. The feeling of being spied upon vanished without a trace. Klein took out his keys and opened the door to see the short-haired man nearing 30s and wearing a linen shirt seated at the desk. His heart tensed up before relaxing immediately. Klein greeted with a smile. Good morning. No, good afternoon, Benson. This man was none other than Klein's and Melissa's elder brother, Benson Moretti. He was only 25 this year, but his receding hairline and decrepit appearance made him look nearly 30. He had black hair and brown eyes, resembling Klein somewhat, but he lacked the faint scholarly air which Klein had. Good afternoon, Klein. How was the interview? Benson stood up as he grinned. His black coat and half-top hat were hanging on a protrusion of their bunk bed. Horrible, Klein replied in a deadpan manner. When he saw Benson stunned, Klein chuckled and added, In fact, I didn't even participate in the interview. I found a job ahead of the interview and it pays £3 a week. He repeated what he had told Melissa again. Benson's expression calmed down as he shook his head with a laugh. It feels like I'm seeing a child grow up. Well, this job is pretty good, he sighed and said. It's great that we first it's great that the first thing I heard is such a good news after being away for work. Let's celebrate tonight and buy some beef? Client smiled. Sure, but I believe Melissa will feel the pinch. Let's buy some ingredients later in the afternoon. Let's bring at least 3 soli. Well, to be honest, a pound exchanges for 20 soli and 1 soli exchanges for 12 pence. There are even denominations like half pence and quarter pence. Such a coin system just goes against logic. It's so troublesome. I think it must be one of the most foolish coin systems in the world. When he said that, he saw Benson's expression turn stern. Feeling a little uneasy, he wondered if he had said anything wrong. Could it be that in the lost memory fragments of the original client, Benson was an outright extreme nationalist who showed no tolerance for any negativity? Benson took a few steps and refuted him with a stern expression. No, it is not one of, but most No, it's not one off, but the most foolish coin system. Not one off? Klein was taken aback, but he quickly snapped to his senses. He looked at his brother in the eye and laughed. Indeed, was great at mocking humor. Benson lifted the corners of his lips and said in all seriousness, You should understand that to an institute a reasonable and simple coin system, one needs to know how to count and grasp the decimal system. Unfortunately, there are too few talents amongst those important figures. A footnote about clients, I think, military training, not clients, but Zomingruis. This does not mean Zomingrui was a soldier. Students in China are made to attend short military stints during their schooling days for short periods of time. Chapter 27, Siblings Dinner. It's simple, sharp. It was simply sharp and incisive. Clan burst out in laughter. Using the rich experience he had from his previous incarnation, he added another insult. In fact, there is no evidence to suggest that those important figures have any brains at all. Good, very good. Benson roared with laughter as he gave thumbs up. Client, you're a lot more humorous than before. After taking a breath, he continued, I have to go to the pier in the afternoon. I'm only off work tomorrow. After that, I'll have time to go to the Fingan City Housing Improvement Company with the both of you. Let's see if they have cheap and good terrace houses for rent. Also, I need to pay Mr. Frankie a visit. Our landlord? The perplexed client asked. Does our current landlord have some terrace houses from pretty good districts under his name? Benson shot his brother a glance and said, amused, have you forgotten the 1 year rental contract we have with him? It has only been 6 months. Client drew a gasp of cold air. He had really forgotten the matter. Although the rent was paid once a week, the lease was a year long. If they were to move now, it was equivalent to a breach in contract. If they'd been taken to court, they would have to compensate large sums of money. You're still lacking in social experience, societal experience. Benson touched his receding black hairline and said wistfully, this was a clause I fought so hard back then. If not, Mr. Frankie was only willing to lease us for 3 months each contract. To those with money, landlords would sign leases for an year, 2 years, or even 3 years to seek stable income. But for us, the past us, and our neighbors, the landlords would have to be constantly worried that something bad might happen, depriving them of their rent. Therefore, they would only sign short term contracts. In that case, they can offer to raise prices according to the situation. Client summarized and added using the original client's memories and his own experience as a tenant. Benson sighed and said, this is the cruel reality of today's society. All right, you don't have to worry. The issue with the contract can easily be resolved. To be frank, even if we owe him a week's rent, Mr. Frankie would have immediately thrown us out and confiscated whatever valuable items we have. After all, his intelligence is below that of the curly-haired baboons. There was no way he can comprehend overly complicated matters. Upon hearing this, client suddenly recalled a particular Sir Humphrey's meme. He shook his head and said seriously, no, Benson, you are wrong. Why? Benson was puzzled. Mr. Frank's intelligence is still slightly higher than baboons, Client replied in all seriousness. Just as Benson was seemed to smile in response, he added, if he is on form. Benson lost it and burst out in laughter. After a series of rapturous laughter, he pointed at Klein and momentarily unable to put his thoughts in words. Only then he returned to the topic at hand. Of course, as a gentleman, we cannot employ such shameless tactics. I will discuss this with Mr. Frankie tomorrow. Believe me, he is easily convinced. Easily. Klein had no doubts regarding Benson's point. The existence of the gas lab pipes was an excellent proof. After some idle chatter between the brothers, the remnants of the pan-fried fish from the previous nights were made into a soup with some vegetables. During the boiling process, steam moistened the rye bread. Smearing a little butter on the bread, Klein and Benson had a simple meal, but they were very satisfied with it. After all, the fragrance and sweetness of the butter brought them endless aftertastes. After Benson left, Klein headed to the lettuce and meat market with 3 solid notes and some spare pennies. He spent 6 pence on the pound of beef and 7 pence on a fresh and succulent fish with few bones. Additionally, he bought potatoes, peas, radishes, rhubarbs, lettuce, turnips, as well as spices such as rosemary, basil, cumin, and cooking oils. During his entire time, he continued to feel like he was being watched, but there was no physical interaction. After spending some time at Simran's bakery, Klein returned home and began weightlifting with heavier items such as books to train his arm strength. He had planned to exercise by military boxing, which he had learned from his compulsory military stint for students. However, he had already forgotten the radio exercise routines from school, much less boxing, which was only taught during military stints. Exasperated, he could only do something simpler. Klein did not overexert himself, since it would lead to fatigue and thus put him in greater danger. He took an appropriate break and began reading the original client's notes and study material. He wished to read anything regarding the fourth epoch again. In the evening, Benson and Melissa sat at the front of the desk. The food was placed neatly like a children in upper primary school. The fragrance of the dishes was composed of a rich melody of scents. The soup captivating fragrance of the soup captivating fragrance of beef, obviously tender potatoes, the sweetness of thick pea soup, the mellow flavors of stewed rhubarb, and the sweetness of buttered dry bread. Benson gulped a mouthful of saliva as he turned around to see Client placing a crispy fish onto the plate. He felt the fragrance of the oil permeate through his nostrils into his throat and then into his stomach. His stomach made a distinct protest. Grant rolled up his sleeves and held the plate of fried fish before placing it in the middle of the tidied desk. Following that, he turned to the cupboard and took out two large cups of ginger beer and placed them where he and Benson sat. He smiled at Melissa and took out a lemon pudding as if he were performing a magic trick. We'll have beer while you have this. Thank you. Melissa took the lemon pudding. When Benson saw this, he raised his cup and said with a smile, "This is to celebrate Client's finding a decent job." Client raised his cup and clinked it with Benson before clicking it with Melissa's lemon pudding. Praise the lady. He tilted his head back and drank it down. The spicy feeling warmed his gullet and bringing him great aftertastes. Hmm. Despite its name, the ginger beer did not contain any alcohol. It was a mixture of ginger spiciness and the sourness of lemon that made it taste similar to beer. It was the kind of beverage that both women and children found acceptable. However, Melissa did not like the taste of it. Praise the lady. Benson drank a mouthful as well while Melissa took a nibble of her lemon pudding. She chewed at it repeatedly before swallowing it down unwillingly. Give it a try. Clan put down his cup and picked up his fork and spoon and pointed at the table full of food. He was most pessimistic of his thick pea soup. After all, he had never anything so strange on earth. All he could do was adapt the recipe from original Client's memory fragments. As the elder brother, Client Benson did not stand on ceremony as he dug a spoonful of mashed potatoes and stuffed it in his mouth. The beaten potatoes were boiled thoroughly and mixed with faint taste of lard and just enough salt. It whetted his appetite and made him salivate. Not bad, praised Benson weakly. It's much more delicious than the one I had back at work. They only use butter. This is one of my specialties, after all, Clan accepted the praise. It it's all thanks to the teachings of the chef at Welch's place. Melissa looked at the beef soup. The green basil leaves, the green lettuce heads, and the radishes were submerged in the colorless soup, covering the tender beef. The soup was clear and the fragrance tantalizing. Melissa forked a piece of beef and placed it in her mouth to chew. The beef retained a little chewiness despite being too tender. The mixture of salt, the sweetness from radishes, and the spiciness from the basil leaves complemented complemented the deliciousness of the beef. She seemed to give her a probation hmm, before she, but she could not stop her chewing. Client tasted it and felt as that although it was delicious, it was not without regret. This was still far from his usual standard. After all, he was lacking in certain condiments and could only use replacements. There was no wonder it tasted different. Of course, even with the best standards, one could only make do with dishes they cooked personally. Suddenly, his heart pained for Benson and Melissa, who were stunted in their worldview. After swallowing a piece of beef, Klein picked up a piece of fried tussock fish, which was sprinkled with cumin and rosemary. It was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. The char was perfectly golden brown, and the saltiness and oil fragrance intertwined as one. Nodding slightly, Klein tried a piece of stewed rhubarb and found it palatable. 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 It got rid of the cloyed taste of meat. Finally, he mustered up his courage and scooped a bowl of thick pea soup. Too sweet and too sour. Klein could not help but frown. However, after seeing Benson and Melissa looking satisfied from tasting it, he began suspecting his taste. He could not help but down a mouthful of ginger beer to cleanse his tongue. The siblings were stuffed by the end of the meal. They laid slumped in their chairs for quite a while. Let us praise the lady once more. Benson raised his ginger beer, which only had one mouthful left, as he said in satisfaction. Praise the lady. Climbed down last bit of his beverage. Praise the lady. Melissa finally put last bit of lemon pudding into her mouth and enjoyed the flavors swishing around her mouth. When Klein saw this, he took advantage of her tipsiness and smiled. Melissa, that's not right. You should eat the thing you find most delicious at the beginning. That way you can fully appreciate its most delicious aspect. Tasting it when you are filled and satisfied will not do the food justice. No, it's still as delicious as it can be, Lisa answered firmly and stubbornly. Siblings had the happy chat, and after digesting their meals, they cleaned up the plates, cutlery, and stored the oil which was used to fry the fish. After busying themselves, it was revision time. One refreshed his accounting knowledge while the other continued reading the study materials and notes. The time was spent to its fullest. At 11, the siblings extinguished the gas lamp and went to the bed after washing up. Klein felt groggy as he stared at the darkness in front of him. A figure wearing a black trench coat and half-top hat appeared suddenly in Klein's vision. It was Dunn Smith. Captain! Klein jolted awake and knew he was dreaming. Dunn's grey eyes remained calm, as though he was mentioning something trivial. Someone has sneaked into your room. Pick up your revolver and force him to the corridor. Leave the rest to us. Someone had sneaked into my room? The observer had finally taken action? Klein jumped in fright and but did not dare ask further. All he did was nod and say, "All right." The scene before his eyes changed immediately as a swath of colors appeared like bursting of bubbles. Klein's eyes opened as he carefully turned his head. He looked towards the window and saw a thin but unfamiliar back standing at his desk, rummaging for something in silence. Okay, let's stop here for today. Thank you for listening. Bye bye.